Hello, dear students. Now, in terms of the sociological thinkers, in this series, we will be picking up the three remaining thinkers: Talcott Parsons, Robert King Merton, and G.H. Mead. I had told you that the last concept class was there in part A, part B, part 3, or class 1, class 2, class 3. Similarly, we'll try to make this concept class in 3 parts, and in every part we'll be picking up one scholar so that the things become much more easier, and it becomes easier in part of it to understand that where the things are going on. I had told you that when you're looking at the thinkers, you basically need to look at those socio-historical background or the methodological concerns through which you would be able to understand that where the thinker is going, what are the themes and how the themes are to be understood, or how the themes are to be approached and analyzed. Let me say, out of all these 6 scholars, in a true sense, this is my assessment. In a true sense, if you are looking at any theory which usually entails abstraction, we find about that perspective of abstraction in the writings and sayings of Talcott Parsons. One of the prominent pillars of the neoclassical sociology, and he will try to address the certain concerns in sociology, which sociology right since its emergence has tried to address that. And thus, now when we are looking at what are the things that has to be talked about in terms of Parsons, so here, methodological concerns that will also involve the socio-historical background in terms of how we are trying to integrate the 3 traditions: utilitarianism, positivism, and idealism, and with which we will also be looking at his theories of social action, or his theory of social action, 1937, a structure of social action. And then we'll also try to look at how the questions have been raised and what has been the base of the question which has been asked to you. So in the methodological concern, first one is, Parsons is known for the search of grand or mega theory. When I say grand or mega theory, then this way the sociological tradition is enriched by Parsons, synthesizing the different branches of social sciences into an integrated one. And particularly in terms of sociology, psychology, anthropology, all would be integrated and would be proposing a grand or mega theory. Now let me quote one line so that you will be able to understand it in a very simple sentence. That whenever we try to approach the society, we find a plethora of theories lying here and there. Every theory has somewhere picked up the certain dimensions and they have explained it. But the moment we change the context, the moment we try to look at their validation in time, they falsify. Thus, what sociology now needs? So the sociology now needs a grand or mega theory so that it will be able to synthesize the different branches of social sciences into an integrated theoretical framework. And into the integrated theoretical framework, this search of Parsons, this attempt of Parsons, basically initiates a new theoretical methodological movement in a sociological tradition, for which Parsons will always be known. Every theory we are looking at, either we are talking about the social action, we are talking about the social system, or even if we are talking about the concept of AGIL, or you talk about the concept of pattern variables, we'll be finding about it how Parsons will be taking from someone, something from some people, will be adding something, and that way the grand or mega theory would be proposed by Parsons. Thus, the first methodological concerns in Parsons is the formulation or proposal of a grand or mega theory in a sociological tradition. And then we'll be looking at the second one, that is synthesization of sociology, anthropology, and psychology. Parsons should also be focusing on terminological exclusiveness. Thus, you find the concept like social system, you find the concept like AGIL, you find the concept like cybernetic hierarchy of control, steering media, pattern variables. Like in every social, every science, every discipline, there are certain specific terminologies which are understood by the practitioners of that discipline. Similarly, if sociology has to develop as a science, the certain kind of terminological exclusiveness should be there. And thus the pure certain concepts, sociological concepts, which only the sociologist will be able to comprehend, has been there in a Parsonian sociology. And then Parsons is also credited to bridge the gap between Durkheim and Weberian methodology. In the last concept class, when we start talking about the methodology, and more precisely when we start talking about positivism, non-positivism, we picked up positivism of Durkheim and we also picked up interpretism of Weber. That way, not only the subject matter of these two scholars have changed, their methodological address has also varied from one to another. And I had told you that if we are looking at the methodological perspective of Durkheim, Durkheim's methodology is for the subject, for the discipline, sociology. Weberian methodology is for the practitioners of the discipline, that is sociology. And that way, the comparative analysis between Durkheim and Weber in terms of methodological concerns was analyzed by us. And in this very attempt, the gap which has widened between the methodological concerns of Durkheim and Weber, Parsons will bridge them. But one of the most important, either you pick up as a socio-historical background or you pick up in terms of the methodological concerns, we'll find about synthesization between three previous traditions, that is utilitarianism, Alfred Marshall, that how the utilitarians have analyzed the social order. Then positivists, for example, Durkheim, and what parameters the positivists have picked up, and then idealism, within which Weber will come out. That's why once again I am saying that the methodological gap which has widened between Durkheim and Weber would be bridged by Parsons. And in this very perspective, either you talk about his socio-historical background or you talk about the methodological concerns, these are the certain methodological concerns in a Parsonian dimension. So once you have done this one, then in the last we talked about the methodological concerns. So we said about A, B, C, D, E. And from here we will be talking about theory of social action, for which we'll be talking about the book that is a structure of social action, 1937. In which Parsonian focus is more on the voluntaristic action. His focus is more on the unit act. And when you look at the preface of this book there, in this preface of the book he writes, now who reads Spencer? Implying none. It means you need to remember that the moment we are talking about functionalism or a structural functionalism, we attribute the contribution of Parsons. But the fact is that when Parsons began his theory of social action, he was nowhere near functionalism. Since he was more concerned of the voluntaristic action, he was more concerned of the unit act. But he was trapped. How to link the voluntaristic action of the two actors, two independent actors, where the individuals have or the actors have made their own choice. And thus, the moment he comes to the third contribution or the second book, that is Social System, (1951), we find about a deviation in a Parsonian methodological theoretical concern. This question has been there in the PYQs, that Parsons tends to deviate from his earlier stand. And that is basically, you will be looking at that how from 1937, where he is focusing on the unit act of actor. And when he comes to having the interactional dimension, looking at the social system, the actions of two or more actors, he'll be finding about the change in his orientation. We'll be finding about the change in his theoretical methodological concerns, for which has been accused. But that is also the enlargement, refinement in a Parsonian theory. And every social system has a certain prerequisites. So the moment there are the questions of functional prerequisites, then you basically not need to talk about the universal typology of action, functional imperative or functional prerequisite. That would be the concept of AGIL, where A stands for adaptation, G for goal attainment, I for integration, L for latency or pattern maintenance and tension management. The two associates of Parsons, Bales and Shields, who have basically worked on the small group behavior, Parsons take reference of that one and applies to the social system. So they are not only asking the questions on AGIL, they are asking the questions on the functional prerequisites, universal typology of action. They are also asking the questions in terms of change, equilibrium, and also from here, cybernetic hierarchy of control and steering media, this question can come to you. And from here, one of the last one would be basically in terms of the concept of pattern variables. And they're also asking in terms of cognitive consonance. They could be there in dissonance. And empirical examples they're asking. So in AGIL, we'll be talking about the modern medical system with the traditional medicine system. While working on the American educational system, we'll be finding about the empirical reality. It was now the two lines that you need to understand. One of the students of Parsons says that anyone who is looking for certain kind of pleasure, entertainment, lightness, is hereby advised not to turn to Parsonian theory. And that's why I said that when you're looking at theory to be a bit of abstraction, that Parson is a field case of it. And Parson has been accused that he moves away from empiricism. No, you need to understand that background. That why he is basically talking about the theoretical, analytical framework and then empiricism. Because just I say that when you say that whenever you are approaching society, you find about the plethora of theories. The moment you change the context, the moment you change the time, the theory falsifies, they show their limitations. Now you need to develop a grand or mega theory which will be testifying time and space. And this condition of falsification of the theories which is emerging out is only because of that there is too much stress has been given on empiricism. Ulta ganga baha raha hai beta. From an analytical framework to empirical. And what we are saying, that is the time in America where focus is more on empirical dimension. Empirical research, empirical investigation, out of which the theories are emerging. Now Parsons says you go, make the certain analytical framework, and then try to look at the empirical reality. The political scientists, the economists, the sociologists, they are having a different kind of theory. Why don't you come out with a mega theory which will be able to integrate the various branches of social sciences into one integrated theoretical framework? And that endeavor, that attempt of Parsons sets him apart from most of the sociologists, and for which he would be criticized severely, not only his own time, but by his young students. Parsons was a tutor of Merton as well. Merton recognizes, Merton says that I have been very impressed by the young tutor, young instructor, that is Talcott Parsons. But the kind of functional prerequisiteness what Parsons was trying to develop, Merton moves away from this. And that we will be finding about the formulation of middle range theories in a Mertonian dimension. Mertonian methodological perspective cannot be understood, comprehended by you unless and until you are comfortable with, you are confident with the methodological concerns of Talcott Parsons. And then you go for the criticism and evaluation. And that's why I said that when you're looking at the Parsons, once again I'm saying, Parsons in sociology is famous for attempting to formulate a mega or a grand theory that is an attempt to integrate all branches of social sciences into overreaching integrated theoretical framework. And by this, Parsons succeeds in initiating a new theoretical methodological discourse in a sociological tradition. In the decades of 50s, Parsons and Merton both would be known for championing the concerns of a structural functionalism. But just I said that the beginning of Parsons in sociology is the structure of social action 1937. Reformulation, reorientation, which sometimes have been accused as a deviation, we'll find about in Parsons in 1951. Thus, what you also need to remember, that Parsonian theory of social system is formulated in a mid-20th century, emerged as an analytical theoretical framework rather than an empirical reference. Analytical theoretical framework. Now here we are talking about rather than empirical framework or referent. क्या हो रहा है बेटा? Everyone is having the empirical kind of reference and they are proposing a theory. Parsons is beginning from here. No. Since you are believing in empirical dimension, whatever you are proposing, whatever the theoretical models you are coming, is unable to testify time and space. That's what you need to do. We need to pick from some and we need to add something so that you will be able to integrate them into a overreaching theoretical framework. So Parsonian focus is here. With this, he is moving to empirical reference. And in this very perspective, though Parsons will be accused of being an incurable theorist, but the fact is that in the analysis of AGIL and also in the analysis of pattern variable, Parsons collected data himself and initiated the empirical research. Overall, when we are looking at the Parsonian theory, you ask most of the students who have prepared sociology, those who are preparing sociology, they will always say that Parsons is difficult. I say no. Understanding Parsons is more easier. Attempting his questions are more easier. What we have developed, that we are basically trying to relate with the empirical kind of perspective. Now Parsons has to be approached with the analytical theoretical framework, in which the empirical examples would be quoted. It's an easy one, dear. I'll make it easy. The entire Parsonian contribution could broadly be divided into three parts. And these three parts would be there in terms of social action, social system, and functional analysis, within which we will be talking about structural functionalism. Either you are talking it from the Durkheim or you are talking more precisely from A.R. Radcliffe Brown, the British tradition of structural functionalism. So broadly, the Parsonian theory could be comprehended into three broader headings: social action, social system, and structural functionalism. But you need to remember that when you talk about functional structuralism, that when Parsons was building his theory of social action in 1937, I just said, he was nowhere near functionalism. And in the preface he writes, who reads Spencer, implying none. But the moment Parsons moves towards social system, interlinking the unit act of the different actors, he is trapped. And thus he moves toward the functional, structural, functionalist analysis. How to interlink the actions of two or more actors? Choice-based, rational-based, voluntaristic action of two or more actors. Then Parsons moves toward the structural functionalism. You also need to know that Parsonian social action is basically reflecting the synthesis of three traditions: utilitarianism, positivism, and idealism. He picks up something from them, adds something to them, and proposes the mega theory There is a mega theory of social action, in which 4 scholars and their impact is more important. Alfred Marshall, Wilfredo Pareto, Emile Durkheim, and Max Weber. And with the synthesization of these influences, Parsons develops a voluntaristic action of, or voluntaristic theory of social action. Now I am giving the certain hints so that you could approach. So after this I will be going into detail in terms of social action, social system, AGIL and pattern variable. Parsonian social system is a special type of social action. I repeat, Parsonian social system is a special type of social action which has the involvement of interaction between actors, where each actor is a goal seeker, and thus in the process of interaction, every actor is both an actor and object of orientation. Actors are confronted with a variety of situations or situational constraints which the actors do not control, which includes ecological as well as societal constraint. An actor's orientation to the situation is both motivational and value orientational. The moment you say motivational, in which you will be finding about the 3. One is called, it is supplying energy to the actor. It is an act to get something. It is the motivation through which actor tries to achieve his goal. It is made up of 3 components. Cognitive, then cathetic, which corresponds to the sentiment, and then evaluative. So, situation is motivational and Ep.4, that is cognitive standard. And the second one is called appreciative standard, related to cathetic. And the third one is moral standard. I repeat now. I'll be defining social system later, but you try to first approach it. Sometimes the abstractness in a Parsonian theory is so deep that it becomes difficult for you to mug up. So once again I am saying Parsonian social system is a special kind of type of social action which has the involvement of process of interaction. The moment you say process of interaction, we are talking about the process of interaction between actor and alters. It means 2 or more actors, in which every actor or actors are the goal seekers. In the process of that goal seeking, they are confronted with the situational constraints, and these situational constraints are both ecological and societal. And the actor's orientation to the situation is both motivational and value orientational. Motivational in 3 components: cognitive, that how the actor perceives, which corresponds to his sentiment, and then he evaluates. Let me give you an example. Cognitive is what actors perceive. Cathetic is corresponding to the sentiment and involvement of processes by which an actor perceive an action with affective significance, that what is pleasurable or painful. However, we should not forget that whenever an actor perceives an object for optimization of gratification, his choices are many. For example, hunger can be satisfied by the different types of foods, in which some foods are preferred, some foods are tabooed, out of which the actor will have to make a choice. So he'll be coming to the third one, that is called evaluative. That is judgment of interpretation of alternatives and selection of the appropriate one. This is motivation. But the another orientation to the situation apart from motivation is a value orientational one. So it supplies norms, values, perspective to the actor. That is observance of social norms and values. It is also composed of the three components, that is why I say cognitive standard. That is those by which actor assesses the validity of the cognitive judgment. सही है या गलत है, आपने जो चुना है. So he is now basically assessing the validity of that judgment. And then appreciative standard are those through which actor selects between cathetic significance, what is pleasurable, painful, when he goes for the optimization of gratification. And then evaluative or moral standard, which is neither cognitive nor appreciative, but the synthesis of all. The different permutation and combination of this would be creating the types of social action. थोड़ा वेबर के साथ भी मिलाकर देख, पढ़ने के बाद कंपेयर करने की कोशिश करना बेटा. 3 types of action: instrumental action, oriented towards a goal attainment, in which primacy is given to cognitive perspective, and the priority is there to cognitive standard, and thus reflecting means to an end. ये jock rational action है बेटा, similar to jock rational action of Weber. What rational action आपने Weber में पढ़ा था? Now when the Weber has talked about the 4 types of action, Parsons is talking about the 3 types of action. And the second type of action is basically expressive action. Sometimes you'll find about consummatory. Use the word expressive action, in which action is an end in itself, and thus primacy is given to cathetic mode. And the third action is called moral action. The focus is on the order itself, and is concerned with realizing the stand of right or wrong. So 3 types of action: instrumental, means to an end; expressive, end in itself. When the focus is more on the order itself, then we are talking about the moral action. Once again I repeat, the different permutation and combination selection from the motivational orientation and the value orientational one, the types of action could be understood. So if the choice is cognitive and cognitive standard, it is instrumental. How the actor has perceived, how he has assessed the validity of his perceiving. When the focus is on the cathetic and primacy is given to appreciative standard, the action is expressive. And when the actor has given focus on evaluative motivation and primacy to the moral or evaluative standard in a value orientation, then the action is a moral. And in this very perspective, you need to approach it. However, you also need to know in a brief that Parsonian social action creates 3 systems. When you say the special type of the social action, it means social action creates social system. And once the social system has emerged out, social system starts regulating the social action. So the first system the social action creates is the social system, that is interaction between actors and continuity of that interaction. One-liner, I'll be coming out about it in detail. But since I wanted you to first become comfortable with the one-liners. So social system is interaction between actors and continuity of that interaction. Then second system is cultural system. It's related to the pronouncement of values. जहाँ से fiduciary system आएगा, just wait for some time. And the third one is the personality system. There is a system of ideas, emotions, motivations that creates actor's personality. However, apart from these three, when Parsons will be talking about the concept of functional prerequisite in terms of social system, that if any society has to survive, it must fulfill these four functions. And when we will be talking about adaptation, he will be talking about the biological system, behavioral system, and that way the fourth system would be emerging out. For which Parsons has been accused of, Parsons has been criticized. And two greatest criticism comes out in terms of one by the C.W. Mills, that Parsons unnecessarily repeats the things several times. What could have been finished in 100 pages, he has made it 300 pages. So time and again, the similar kind of things would be talked about in Parsons. You will realize it while reading Parsons. You will realize it while watching this video. And Parsons keeps on changing from one to another. There is some sort of flexibility according to the situation we find about the change in a person in orientation. And the way the Parsons has basically provided book length treatment to social system, Parsons has not provided that book length treatment to other systems, either it be cultural, personality, or later on in terms of behavioral system. So these are the certain outcomes, these are certain shortcomings of a Parsonian theory. But once Parsons has talked about the social system, Parsons is now talking about the problem of social system or functional prerequisite of social system. Functional imperative of the social system. जैसा भी word हो बेटा क्वेश्चन देख लेना, चाहे तुमसे पूछा problem of social system, चाहे तुमसे क्वेश्चन है functional prerequisite, or either they are asking about the functional imperative, you basically pick up AGIL. That is adaptation with the physical environment to extract resources. Then goal attainment, that is the need or to define the primary goal and enlisting individual to strive for attaining the goal. And once this A and G are fulfilled, then the integration, that is recognition of a group in a society as a cohesive unit. And the fourth, latency or pattern maintenance or tension management, that is to maintain motivation of individuals to perform their roles to achieve the goals according to social expectations by managing the tension. In which we will be talking about cybernetic hierarchy and steering media. Yet another dimension through which Parsons has to be approached. I was talking about some important points to approach Parsons. Is basically the concept of pattern variable. This is also called value dichotomy. So whenever the actor, simple sentence, whenever the actor tries to achieve a goal, he confronts with a certain values, dichotomies are present. Which one he choose, that way the pattern variable or system would be working upon. So in other words, pattern variables are alternatives before the actors in a situational orientation and are related with a certain types of values. And thus, how actor provides primacy or preference to one above the another is a pattern variable, like ascription versus achievement. Sometimes you'll finding what quality versus performance, particularism versus universalism, diffusionism versus specificity, effective versus effective neutrality, and self versus collective orientation. Now, once you have done this one, then you now try to go detail into the Parsons. These were the certain insights which I made you to understand Parsonian theory. Now with this, when you talk about the Parsonian social action, Parsonian social action is a voluntaristic action, is internal in nature, which clearly reflects the impact of Max Weber on him. However, Parsons also becomes interested in knowing the models of social action in economics theories, which makes him to tilt towards utilitarian tradition within which the work of Alfred Marshall becomes important. Broadly, Parsonian sociology of social action reflects the impact of Alfred Marshall, Wilfredo Pareto, Emile Durkheim, and Max Weber. And by synthesizing all these four, he initiates an attempt to search grand or mega theory. Though Parsons picks up social action as voluntarist action, but is also trapped into the implication of a structural functionalism and voluntaristic action, resulting into the problem of social order. Now, when we're talking about the problem of social order, he said the different branches of social science, either you were talking about the political science, they have talked about the Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes, Durkheim in terms of sui generic reality. Economics have talked about the utility of an object. And that way they have tried to address the perspective of social order. Durkheim does not agree with this. And with this, he said, merely by the fear of the sword, order cannot be maintained. Merely by the external configuration of object in terms of sui generis, what Durkheim has said, social order cannot be created. And merely by utility, order cannot be created. Some normative pattern is required in a society. This is yet untouched area in Parsons. Problem of social order. Problem of functional prerequisite, functional imperatives. We talked about AGIL. But if they ask you the problem of social order, you say the problem, he said the problem of social order has been a typical concern in all the social sciences. And broadly, he picks up the Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes, Durkheim's external coercive collectivity, sui generis reality, economists heading towards utilitarianism. But Parsons moves away from them and addresses the problem of social order through the internalization of roles, 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 norms and values, which serve to define an actor. Thus, Parsons writes that a role comes with precise normative obligation, which makes the actor know how to behave. It means the concept is called complementarity of roles. Equilibrium में भी जाएगा बेटा, आपको बहुत सा क्वेश्चन equilibrium में भी है. The publication of this book, A Structure of Social Action, 1937, marks the beginning of Parsonian sociology, in which he picks up the perspective of utilitarianism, positivism, idealism. Four scholars, once again I'm repeating, Alfred Marshall, Wilfredo Pareto, Emile Durkheim, and Max Weber. By synthesizing them, he basically comes out with his own theory that is called voluntaristic action theory. It means Parsons argues that the structure of social order cannot be derived directly from actors' situational point of reference, as it also requires the analysis of complication induced by interaction between plurality of actors. Thus, Parsons' voluntaristic action involves actor, number one. Number two, actor as a goal seeker. Number three, selection among alternatives means. Number four, alters or actors' confrontation with situational condition. Fifth, actor is governed by values, norms, other ideas. Sixth, actor has a subjective decision making. On the basis of this, if I now say, here, छोटा सा diagram दो बनाता हूं बेटा. Actor means one कर लो, means two कर लो, is a goal. So right. Values, ideas, norms. This is Parsonian social action. For example, if you say actor is a working woman who is a BA pass. She realizes that if she gets BA honors degree, she will be getting promotion. Her salary would be increased. There will be increment in the salary. So the actor, working woman who is a BA pass, the goal is BA honors. Now, if any actor has to do the BA honors, then what would be the normative order? The normative requirement that the candidate must be BA pass. यहाँ आ गया बेटा. And a situational constraint, money, paisa, time. Since that actor is working, तो उसके पास पैसा भी होना चाहिए. He or she should have a money. He should have a time off. And then he will be looking at which are the colleges, which are the universities, which are offering the courses of honors what he is desiring, which he can afford to, either in terms of money or also in terms of his time. So these are the means. So the actor would be calculating the means to achieve the goal. Actors on the basis of the subjective meaning will try to achieve the goal. Weber. But to achieve the goals, the means are provided by the social structure, Durkheim. What I told you, that the way methodological gap has emerged between Durkheim and Weber was bridged by Parsons. Now on the basis of this beta, the following pattern can be outlined. First, it is the most basic social process. It is the unit act of social system involving succession of acts or two more actors. And through this, theory can be formulated. और यहीं से बेटा social system को उठा लेना. Now from here I am quoting, completely quoting Parsons in terms of our understanding of social system. When this unit act of Parsons is enlarged into theory in a wider system, then Parsons starts talking about the theory of social system. Social system as consisting of plurality of individual actors interacting with one another in a situation which has at least a physical environment, and actors are motivated in terms of tendency to optimization of gratification, and whose relation to this situation, including each other, is defined and mediated in terms of system of culturally structured shared symbols. इसको ठीक से 2 बार सुन लेना बेटा, and note down this one. Parsons considered them as a necessary analytical elements a priori fixed category, indispensable in every kind of analysis. And Parsons interlinks normative and situational order. Thus, with the conception of action, interaction, and institutionalization of interaction, he describes modes of orientation, types of action, and institutionalization of social system. 2 डायग्राम बनाता हूं बेटा, दोनों को देखो. क्या क्या था बेटा? मोटिवेशनल, वैल्यू ओरिएंटेशनल. ये क्या क्या था बेटा? ये कॉग्निटिव, कैथेटिक एंड इवैल्यूएटिव. ये क्या क्या था बेटा? कॉग्निटिव स्टैंडर्ड, एप्रिसिएटिव स्टैंडर्ड, इवैल्यूएटिव और moral standard. ये modes of थे. Different permutation and combination primacy, through which we talked about the types of action. So from here, types of action. क्या क्या था action बेटा? 3. Instrumental action, expressive action and moral action. All right. And then internalization of action. Of interaction rather. With which comes social system. And once again I am saying, social system consisting of plurality of actors interacting with one another in a situation which at least has a physical environmental aspect from which the resources will be extracted. And actors are motivated in terms of tendency to the optimization of gratification because they are the goal seekers. And whose relation to this situation, including each other, is defined and mediated in terms of system of culturally structured shared symbols, norms, values, ideas. And now, apart from this, when I'll be talking about the second diagram, then types of orientations, types of action, interaction between actors. From this, we'll be talking about internalization of interaction, this internalization of action is nothing but social system, and social system once again will be talking about the types of orientation, types of action, interaction, and this will, it means social action creates social system, and once social system comes out, it basically affects the social action. Now look at when Parsons says that whenever we confront society, we find about the plethora of theories which are unable to testify the time and space. Here is that how the social action came out, how the social system emerged out, and once the social system order emerged out, how that is basically guiding the social action. So if the social system creates social action creates social system, then social system is now controlling the social action. And that's why once again, Parsons though begins with the unit act, but later on combines the process of interaction. That is how the variously goal-oriented actors, in terms of their configuration of motivation, cognitive, cathetic, evaluative, configuration of motivations and value orientations, enter the process of interaction and thereby developing agreements and sustaining the pattern of interaction, which becomes institutionalized. This institutionalized social interaction or pattern is nothing but social system. Such institutionalized pattern is conceptualized by Parsons as a social system in which the normative organization of a status role becomes key. In other words, Parsons considers that the study of status, roles, norms is a subject matter of sociology in which social action is the building block of social system. यहाँ से उठा लो बेटा, right? And in this very perspective, Parsons is also talking about that social action also creates two other systems. One is social system has been there, two other systems, that is the cultural system and personality system. Though these three systems are independent from one another, are conceptually different from one another, but Parsons conceptualizes the interpenetration of one or between these three. In other words, the organization of a unique act into a social system requires a parallel conceptualization of values and motives, which are respectively related to cultural and personality system. Thus, in a Parsonian theory, Parsonian sociology, social action can be understood in the sense that how institutionalized pattern of interaction, that is social system, is circumscribed by a complex of values, beliefs, norms and other ideas, that is cultural system, and also by the configuration of motives and role playing skills, that is the personality system. और इसी को देख लेना बेटा, अभी क्या करना है, इसको ऐसे कर लेना है. ये भी इक्विलिब्रियम में यूज होगा बेटा. दिस विल आल्सो बी यूजिंग इन इक्विलिब्रियम. हियर आइडिया एज ए सोर्स, and B, idea as constraint. यहां क्या करना बेटा, what social system and personality system are interacting? Mechanization equation है बेटा ये. Mechanization of socialization and B, mechanization of social control. And now what is the link between cultural and personality system? That is internalization of value system into personality system through cultural system. Though you need to remember two things. Social system is also having the two parallel perspectives, the value system, cultural system and a personality system. Though these three, social system, cultural system, personality system, are conceptually different from one another, they are not to be clubbed. But Parsons conceptualizes the interpenetration between these three. This is the diagram. And in addition to the above three systems, there is one more system which he adds when he moves toward the functional prerequisite of the system, that is biological system. Since in a social system there is a physical environmental aspect from which the goal oriented actor would be extracting the resources to satisfy his goal. Alright? And this way we will be finding about the certain perspectives in terms of AGIL. Alright? When the system will become larger, it will be having the subsystem. So biological system, personality system, social system, cultural system, having the subsystems in terms of adaptive subsystems, goal attainment subsystem, integrative subsystem, latency pattern maintenance or tension management subsystems, in which what are the institutions? In an adaptive we will be finding about economy, in a goal attainment we will be finding about polity, in a social system or integrative subsystem we will be finding about collectivity, and in a cultural system we will be finding about fiduciary. Alright? And thus, By linking the systems precisely being cultural, social, personality system, Parsons also picks up the notion of socialization and social control, where a mechanism of socialization is seen by Parsons as a means through which cultural patterns are inherited, internalized into the personality system, thereby addressing the need structure. It is through socialization that actors are made willing to deposit motivational energy into roles, complementarity of roles. It also provides stable and secure interpersonal ties that collectively alleviates anxieties, tensions, and strain. Whereas the mechanism of social control involves those ways in which roles are organized into social system to reduce strain and deviance, including institutionalized interpersonal gestures and sanctions. Thus, through these two mechanisms, we can witness the perspective of resolving the integrative problem faced by the social system, thereby maintaining equilibrium. All right? Parsons focus on homeostasis, tendency for stable equilibrium, regulation and maintenance of stability. Okay? Whenever there is a disequilibrium, it will be coming back to its own position, and from there, the equilibrium would be maintained. And with this, we will be talking about the concept of AGIL. Up to here, what we have done? We define unit act, voluntaristic action, choice-based action. And then we started talking about the institutionalized pattern of interaction. We talked about the social system, physical environment. We also talked about the three systems, added one more. That is cultural system, social system, personality system, biological system, behavioral organism. And that way we are talking about the four systems. Now the concept of AGIL is a crucial in a Parsonian analysis of social system. It reflects the perspective of functional prerequisite or functional imperative that stands for abbreviation of adaptation, goal attainment, integration, and latency or pattern maintenance and tension management, which Parsons, this AGIL, Parsons attributes to be a common functional feature in every system. The idea of AGIL can be traced back to the study of a small group behavior conducted by the two associates of Parsons, that is R.E. Bells and Edmund Seals, who in their study observed the tendency of regularity in the way a group works whenever assigned to accomplish a task. The group exactly follows these four stages: adapts with the environment, resources, goal attainment, integration, and latency. Parsons adopted and applied this in his theory of social system, referring them as a universal typology of action, or problem of functional imperative, or functional prerequisite to make a system survive in a stable condition, where adaptation is providing for disposable resources and a facility is from external environment, physical environment. Goal attainment is a coordination of goal, mobilization of motivation, and organizing the efforts of actors, whosoever are in the process of interaction. Integration is the mutual adjustment of the units for the collectivity for the system as a whole. And latency is the maintenance of stability of institutionalized culture, reflecting pattern maintenance and tension management. All right? And that way AGIL will be coming out. Polity, legal, family, economy. We talk about these kind of institutions. Subsystems, whenever the system will become bigger, it will having the subsystem. But Parsons is also talking about the nest of Chinese box. That in every part, AGIL, we will be finding about AGIL in all this. So if we talk about economy, economy is also involving AGIL. If we talk about polity, polity is also talking about AGIL. And in this very perspective, we are talking about the types of social action. And the diagram which you need to draw is here. Primary functions. All right? क्या करेंगे बेटा? इधर चलेंगे AGIL. All right? Action system. क्या क्या होगा अब A में? behavioral system. G में पर्सनालिटी सिस्टम, I में सोशल सिस्टम, L में कल्चरल सिस्टम, एडेप्टिव फंक्शन, गोल अटेनमेंट फंक्शन, इंटीग्रेटिव फंक्शन, लेटेंसी और पैटर्न मेंटेनेंस एंड टेंशन मैनेजमेंट फंक्शन, कल्चरल सिस्टम, social system. All right. You talk about these four: cultural system, social system, I. All right. And then personality system, and then behavioral system. And from here, social system, you draw like this. And here is a system or subsystem. यहाँ पे fiduciary वैल्यू है, यहाँ सोसाइटल कम्युनिटी, इन्फ्लुएंस है, यहां पर्सनालिटी सिस्टम, पॉलिटी, पावर है, एंड बिहेवियरल सिस्टम, इकोनॉमी, मनी, इसका एक्सचेंज है. राइट. एंड देयर इज अ फिजिकल एनवायरमेंट हियर. And here is ultimate reality. That is basically information. तो क्या होगा? One current is going from here to here. Look at this. And from here, information, it is coming to energy. तो यहां पे है बेटा information. यहां पे है energy. Motivation, which enact to get something. So every social system has at least a physical environmental aspect from which the resources would be extracted. So there is a physical environment. With this, adaptation will be done, goal attainment, integration. अब ये जो दोनों है, by the time there is a synthesis between these two, currents from A to L and L to A, system will continue. Any discrepancy between these two modes of currents, from L to A and A to L, from energy to information, information to energy, any discrepancy will require change. So Parsons will be talking about change in the system. We will also be talking about change of the system. यहीं से change का dimension उठा लीजिए. And in everyone here, there are certain things. Generalized media of exchange है, like money, power, influence and value. This is called cybernetic hierarchy of control and steering media. अब मैं थोड़ा सा बोलता हूं, बट सुनो बेटा. Parsons further argues, मैं Parsons को कोट कर रहा हूं. Parsons further argues that every subsystem has something of functional importance, which he refers as a generalized symbolic media of exchange, which are respectively money, power, influence and value. Through the interchange between them, integration and equilibrium could be found, which also reflect the concept of cybernetic hierarchy of control and steering media. On the basis of the above diagram, it can be seen that at the level of social system, 4 subsystems performing AGIL are economy, polity, societal community and fiduciary. The last one. Fiduciary system is the name Parsons preferred for the social subsystem that perform the pattern maintaining fixed function by reproducing, legitimizing and maintaining commitment to belief, values, morals, and expressive symbols. It is linked to cultural system. The societal community is a subsystem represents solidarity, cohesiveness, and loyalty to the social norms. Polity deals with the selecting and coordinating selective goals and organizing and coordinating collective efforts. And finally, the economy handles the function of producing and distributing goods, representing the interface between social system and physical environment, and extracting resources for the functioning of the whole system. Between all the subsystems, there are mutual interchange, and sub-subsystems supply the other with something of functional importance, that is, value, influence, power, and economy. This is called concept of steering media. ठीक है? अब ये डायमेंशन ला लो बेटा, इसी में इक्विलिब्रियम ला लो, which are social science reveals that social life has a tendency to be and remain a functionally integrated phenomena. यहाँ से concept of functionalism ला दो. What is cybernetic? Cybernetic is basically the study of information. जैसे कार देख लो, if you look at an automobile, engine controls everything. If you look at air, brain controls everything. So that way the cybernetic is coming on flow of information from energy to information, or from A to L and L to A, maintaining the equilibrium. All right. Though just when we started, I said the Parsons has been accused of being an incredible theorist. But particularly in terms of the AGIL, Parsons has basically collected data from the American University, in which he works on higher education. He reflects the functional prerequisite of AGIL within itself. Nest of Chinese box. In American University, the structure of higher education can be described as specializing in implementing the cultural pattern of cognitive rationality, that is, scientific approach to generate knowledge for search of truth. Hence, the whole range of teaching and learning is in American higher education is based on the framework of cognitive rationality as a paramount value in the American system of higher education. All right. Parsons has used the methods of survey. All right. And in this way, the certain empirical dimension will come out. And then we are talking about the concept of pattern variable. It is yet another conceptual category in the Parsonian sociology, which links the social action with the social system. In the initial stage, Parsons was preoccupied with the formation of the theory of action, in which he focused on actors' purposive orientation. थोड़ा पानी पी लो बेटा. When you say actors' purposive orientation, it means actor is a goal seeker. So actor is going for the optimization of gratification. However, by doing so, actor have to negotiate with the certain conditions defined and regulated by normative expectations before actor could go for optimization of gratification. And thus Parsons developed clear specification of contingencies and expectations that our actors are likely to face while going for their goal orientation. Though the situations are not uncertain or unstructured, within which Parsons analyzes pattern variable. Parsons with the concept also tries to analyze individual choices from macro cultural perspective. Since different culture guide the individual towards one or other sets of values, in which actor has to make a choice and give primacy to one above the other, which could broadly be referred to as a pattern variable or pattern alternatives of value orientation. It also shows the link of individual with the culture. Social action with the social system, individual with the culture. All right? Individual choices with the macro cultural perspective. And what are the works which Parsons has taken reference of? Parsons pattern variable can be kind of Ferdinand Tönnies, Gesellschaft, Community Association, pre-modern, modern. All right. Max Weber's ideal type of authority related to tradition and modernity. And also Ralph Linton's description of ascriptive versus achieved roles. Parsons argues that pattern variables are not only the analytical framework, but also the categories in which actors' choice between extremes can be identified. And thus Parsons explains 5 forms of pattern variables: ascription versus achievement. All right. Effective versus effective neutrality. Particularism versus universalism. Specificity versus diffuseness. And self-orientation versus collective orientation. 5. Asan hai beta. But do remember that in your mains, when you are writing the pattern variable, if the questions are there, pick up only one example because the actor has the 2 choices. The moment you take the 2 examples, it means now you are making the 4 choices. For example, when I am talking about ascription versus achievement, which is also called quality versus performance, it is a choice between morality of social object. That is a dichotomy according to the treatment of object in terms of quality in itself or what it performs. For example, if a candidate is selected on the basis of caste, creed, race, gender, nationality, it is ascriptive. Where it is, if it is selected on the basis of merit or performance, it is achievement. Parsons argues that modern bureaucratic actors are concerned with what people have accomplished, not what they are, what their parents are. Right? You use the same ascriptive, and achieve will be going in a mobility, in a caste versus class. So you have bureaucratic system pe lago. Effective versus effective neutrality. The pattern is effective when it is organized toward the gratification. That when an actor tries to avoid pain and maximize pleasure. Whereas the pattern is effective neutral when it implies discipline or a renunciation of gratification. Soldiers are expected to ignore immediate gratification to be effective neutral in the line of duty, even if that involves risking their lives. Mother loves the child most. But when she finds the child is becoming indisciplined, she has a 2 choice, either to ignore his behavior or to punish him to become disciplined. So this is effective versus effective neutrality. Particularism versus universalism is a choice between types of values and orientation. A specificity versus diffusionism is a dichotomy of defining the relationship bound by object to actor as indefinitely wide or broader in involvement, तो ये diffusionist होगा, और a specificity or limited in scope, तो ये specificity होगा. Self orientation versus collective orientation is also private versus collective interest dilemma बोलते हैं. This dichotomy depends on social norms or shared expectation, which define as legitimate pursuit of actors' private interest. अब इसी में बेटा एक तरफ जो 5 लिखे हो, पैटर्न वेरिएबल, इधर से क्या क्या लिखा है, एस्क्रिप्शन, ऐसे करके 5 इधर और 5 इधर, इधर 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5, है ना. मैंने क्या बोला था, इट लिंक्स सोशल एक्शन विद द सोशल सिस्टम, इंडिविजुअल विद एक्शन, individual choice with that of the macro perspective. So Parsonian analysis of pattern variable can also be used not only to distinguish types of society. कैसा होगा बेटा? So इनके combination में Parson is also talking about the 4 types: universalistic, particularistic, and ascriptive achievement pattern. American society is based on universalistic achievement pattern. Nazi Germany was based on universalistic ascriptive pattern. Classical Chinese society reflected particularistic achievement pattern, and traditional Indian society was based on or is based on particularistic ascriptive pattern. So that way we are using the types of society in terms of pattern variable. But it is also to analyze the fact that no society is absolutely static. Though Parson has been referred as an incurable theorist, but in some of his works we find an interest in empirical research. So in one of the units of social system, that is social structure and dynamic process, semicolon, do bindu. In the case of modern medical practices, Parsons uses the schema of pattern variable to analyze the doctor-patient relationship being based on the method of participant observation and interview. It also reflects a change from traditional to modern expressive to instrumental, and Gemeinsaft to Gesellschaft, manifesting a paradigm shift in which Parsons compared the traditional medicine man with that of the modern doctor. छोटा सा एग्जांपल देता हूं, समझ जाओगे. The role of modern doctor related with technical nature in terms of instrumental achieved status, who is expected to be effective neutral. He is a specialist of health and disease. To him, every patient is equal and is expected out of him that he will view the problem of patient on the basis of objective scientific mode, universal pattern. That way, the tribal medicine man and the modern doctor. So we are reflecting a shift. Pattern variable is also talking about the notion of change from traditional to modern, from expressive action to instrumental, from a Gemeinsaft society to Gesellschaft. तो ये article social structure and dynamic process in the case of modern medical practices, where Parsons is concerned of doctor-patient relationship, for which he is using the methods of participant observation and interview. All right. And in this very perspective, Parsons is also talking about the form of macro perspective. A specific culture of society seems to be dominated by one choice or another. However, from the standpoint of the individual, it would be variations in intensity of commitment. The normative pattern is something, doing something. All right. That way, a certain kind of dissonance will be coming out. फिर बोलता हूं बेटा, however, from the standpoint of the individual, it would see variations in intensity of commitment that would make it possible to choose the same in all situations, but when in certain conditions, if it would witness a possibility of variations. एक में achievement चुन लिया, एक में दूसरा कुछ चुन लिया. No, this is called cognitive dissonance. In other words, cognitive consonance is a state of mind in which the person's state of mind, attitude are convergent and in harmony with unconscious, emotional or internal belief. और तो तुमको एक बार क्वेश्चंस कॉग्निटिव कॉन्सोनेंस का है, यहां से उठा लो बेटा. और some criticism has already been done. Though 2 or 3 questions are more important. One, prepare the, you make a line how to approach Parsons, write down few points. Mega theory, utilitarian positivism, idealism, social action, social system, functional theory. Define the social action. Social system is a special type of social action, define that one. Motivational and value-orientational situation. Then go for the social, cultural, personality system and add the biological system. The diagram which I made through the AGIL, so functional prerequisite will come out. And whenever there is an alternative of value dichotomies, pattern variable will come out. Have you realized in this 2 hours that we have repeated the same line several times? That's why I had said it that if you are looking at C.W. Mills, he said what Parsons could have finished in few pages. Unnecessarily he repeats himself. There is a deviation in Parsons' perspective. And Parsons is also accused of being a status quoist. All right? He picks up utilitarianism, positivism and idealism. They are a certain kind of conservative ideologies. There is no Marx, there is no Nietzsche. So Parsons picks up those scholars who are somewhere conservative. So Parsons is accused of status quo ideologies. You will be finding such kind of questions. Parsons is accused that Parsons considers the actors to be cultural dops, over-socialized one. And whenever there is a sudden change, Parsons adapt certain kind of perspective. With this, you try to adapt Parsons. This is the person in one. And then we will be talking about mutton and a meat. You just go through this one. If there is any problem, connect with me. Thank you.